Do you know why the Titanic sank? Think again. The iceberg? It might not be the villain you think it is. Then who is? In this video, we'll uncover the surprising truths about the Titanic that you never saw coming. Secrets shrouded in ice for over a century. So stick around to find out whether what you already know is truth or myth. Number 6. There were real-life love stories on Titanic. Among the unsuspecting passengers were 13 honeymooning couples who boarded on what they thought would be the most romantic journey of their lives. Little did they know the iceberg of fate awaited them. Take millionaire J.J. Astor, for example. He and his pregnant young wife boarded the Titanic, expecting smooth sailing into marital bliss. Alas, tragedy struck, and in a heart-wrenching moment, Astor helped his wife onto a lifeboat, sealing his fate. If only the crew knew she was expecting, they might have let him join her. Mrs. Astor survived, and later that year, she gave birth to John Jacob Astor VI. Then there's the story of Isidore and Ida Strauss, the power couple behind Macy's department stores. Even in the face of disaster, their love stood unyielding. As the ship faced its doom, the couple decided to face it together. Archibald Gracie, a witness at the Senate inquiry, recounted their steadfast decision. Despite pleas to separate for a chance of survival, the Strausses insisted on sharing their fate. Love conquered even the icy grip of the Atlantic. Can you imagine the scene? Passionate discussions about facing death together, spouses choosing unity over solo survival. It's like a heartbreaking scene from a movie, but no, this was the real-life drama unfolding on the Titanic. Number 5. People died even before the Titanic set sail. As the Titanic was being built in Belfast, Ireland, at least 8 workers were killed. William Macaulay, a riveter who was 24 years old, fell from a high place while working on the ship's deck. Some people died as a result of industrial mishaps, such as being crushed by falling objects, drowning in the dry dock, or being poisoned by fumes. Newspapers in the area ran gloomy stories about death at the Titanic, which stood in sharp contrast to the luxurious reputation of the ship. The tragedy outside the port affected people who never got on the ship. A train hit and killed 19-year-old trimmer James Lovell at the docks in Southampton, England, a busy port city getting ready for the Titanic to leave. The White Star Line only gave his family £20 in compensation, but they were left with grief instead of a goodbye. Stats show that 712 crew members died when the ship sank, and many of them were buried in the icy water without a grave being marked. There were young stewards like John Newell, who was only 19, and experienced cooks like Charles Jochin, who wouldn't leave his job at the galley until all the women and children were safe. Along with the names of the engineers, firefighters, and deckhands, theirs is a quiet roll call of the heroes who died with the ship. Even on board, people died before the iceberg hit. Mrs. Lucy Duff Gordon, a first-class guest, slipped and broke her arm on board. Nobody could have predicted that the injuries would play a role in her subsequent death from complications. Number 4. Lack of lifeboats. Ironically, Captain Smith cancelled an emergency lifeboat drill scheduled for the day. The reasons for this decision are unknown. Their ignorance prevented them from realizing this seemingly insignificant choice would have significant repercussions. Lives could have been saved if the practice had been carried out. If the passengers had been aware of the necessary evacuation procedures, they would have been more likely to follow them during the emergency. On the other hand, a disorderly evacuation started around 1 hour after the collision with the iceberg. When the first lifeboat, which was intended to carry 65 people, set off, there were only 28 people on board, which was a tragic precedent. Most of the lifeboats launched were not fully occupied, with some carrying only a few individuals. Following the marine rules, the first people to enter lifeboats were to be either women or children. However, as a result of the disorganized process, a significant number of victims were females and children who were unable to make it to the boats in time. An opportunity to better prepare passengers for the mayhem was lost when the drill that was supposed to take place was never carried out. Also, the building of the Titanic was an issue. The ship was of the Olympic class and included 15 watertight bulkhead compartments and a double bottom. According to Shipbuilder magazine, these bulkheads were deemed virtually irresistible to sinking. On the other hand, there was a problem. The walls that separated the bulkheads only extended a few feet above the waterline, which meant that water might flow from one compartment to another. Number 3. The music played until the end of Titanic's drowning. The 8-member ship's band, led by violinist Wallace Hartley, chose not to abandon their posts when disaster struck, but to face the icy abyss with their instruments. The song the band played in their last hours are hard to remember because different people have told different stories. Some survivors remember well-known songs, like Nearer My God to Thee, and waltzes like Autumn. Others remember lively ragtime tunes. There was chaos, shouts, and a stampede of people trying to get onto lifeboats, but the band opted to stay and play music instead. As the ship sank, some survivors said they saw Hartley conducting his soldiers in a musical performance, their faces lit up by the dying light. Hartley appeared serene and undisturbed. Some survivors said they saw Hartley calm and stoic leading his men in a musical performance. Hartley, the 33-year-old band leader, is known as a symbol of how brave they were. Reports say he turned down a lifeboat seat saying, "We stand by the passengers." Some people, like the father of 2 violinists, John Moody, decided to stay even though his wife and kids were getting away on a lifeboat. These 3 names, along with those of trumpeter John Law Hume and cellist Roger Bricot, are on a list of musicians who died with their instruments. Number 2. Fire damaged the ship. Irish writer Shannon Maloney says in Titanic: The New Evidence, that a fire may have seriously damaged the ship's hull weeks before it set sail, which goes against the usual story. Through careful study of photos and eyewitness accounts, Maloney says that a fire in one of the Titanic's coal bunkers that was ignored because of concerns about bad press and the need to stick to the schedule may have played a part in the disaster. Maloney was shocked to find a 30-foot-long black streak near where the iceberg hit when he looked through a bunch of construction pictures. Engineers at Imperial College London think that this streak might have been caused by a fire in the coal tanks, which were where the ship's engine's fuel was kept. Maloney believes the fire began 3 weeks before the first trip and caused damage that contributed to the fatal crash into the iceberg. Number 1. The wreck of the Titan. Curiously, there is additional literary evidence that points to the Titanic tragedy. In 1898, Morgan Robertson wrote a book called The Wreck of the Titan, which was much like what happened to the Titanic. The book was about a ship called Titan that hit an iceberg on its first trip across the Atlantic. The Titan was thought to be unsinkable. Robertson's work, written 14 years before the Titanic disaster, makes people wonder if he was writing with a clear sense of the dangers of the sea. Maybe those are 10 reasons why 2 last-minute cancellations by passengers with great fears add to the mystery. About 50 booked passengers didn't show up at the last minute and were ready to lose the money they paid for the trip. One missing person was J.P. Morgan, a banker whose shipping trust ran the White Star Line. Morgan, an officer in the company, was supposed to go on the Titanic with co-workers, but changed his mind at the last minute, making people wonder if he knew what would happen. Such discoveries provide fresh light on the catastrophe, calling into question the long-held storyline and forcing a re-evaluation of the causes of the Titanic's tragic loss of life. There are unexpected layers beneath the sad surface of the Titanic story that keep coming to light, whether the possible effects of a hidden fire or the uncanny foresight of literary works. What do you think about these unknown facts about Titanic? Do let us know in the comment section below, and check out the channel for more such interesting videos.